I'm Matt Colangelo, and
I'm Dave Pittman.
And we're two creatives who work for Y&R, Young and Rubicam, which I don't know if you're all familiar with it. It's a big advertising agency that has offices all over the world. I came from the office in New York, and Dave will tell you about it a little bit later, but he came from a different background. He was an entrepreneur, and we did a side project that took 90 days, and it was called 90 Days of Making.
We made something every day for 90 days. Not always clear from the name.
Yeah, so a different creative project every day. So it could be like a poster, or it could be a robot, or it could be really anything, a sculpture. But we had to do one thing every single day, not business days, just regular days.
Like every day.
Every day.
Every day.
And we survived. And,
there were times when we posted like the next day because we stayed up too late working on something the night before. Yeah, so there were lots of times when we didn't actually quite hit the deadline, but that's okay.
So that was our side project. More people are coming in.
Oh, wow.
They wanted us to lead this as a discussion.
This isn't
as
Edward
opposed to
Snowden.
us.
You guys know this isn't Edward Snowden, right? Just want to make sure. Yeah. It's like way too many people.
Yeah. So anyway, so they wanted us to lead this as a conversation as opposed to us just talking for an hour. So
that would be amazing.
We'll be opening this up for anytime you guys have a question or just want to interrupt us, just like raise your hand or speak up.
Or if you guys want to come up here, actually, I mean, there is a little bit of room. We can make room. I can move the frog and my name. You want to, yeah, let's do that. Let's do that.
We asked this before, but now there are more people. Are you guys mostly employees or employers? Or people like looking to do a side project or looking to let people
do a side project?
All the above. Okay. Looking to keep people from doing it.
Good thing we saved all the seating.
Yeah. Be more in the middle here. Okay. Yeah. Sit down.
Yeah. No, absolutely. Yes.
My power pose.
Hey. Are you guys all one group?
Yeah, we are.
That's awesome.
Oh, cool. Okay.
Wait, where are you from? Amsterdam. Cool.
I'm a spy in their group.
You are.
Yeah, nice. Welcome to their group.
So we had to sell this project, which sounds a little outlandish. You know, making something new every day for 90 days. That wasn't for a client. It was totally unbillable for the agency, for Y&R, and we had to sell this into them and explain what the value of that project was to Y&R, which is kind of a difficult thing because it is unbillable. So the value isn't really tangible in it, and the value isn't immediate. So as with a lot of side projects, you know, a lot of people want to do different things, want to do things that they're interested in, and sometimes that's not immediately valuable for a client, but yet it is valuable in the long term. And so you have to be able to express that in order to sell it in. So we're going to talk about how we did that, and then take questions from you guys. You know, if you have ideas, if you have side projects you want to do and are curious, like just want to talk about them.
Morning. Yes.
Welcome. We work in advertising.
No. We were going to get started in like 10 minutes.
There's another 40 coming. So.
Okay, cool.
Oh,
yeah. No, well, that's just
it.
Yeah.
I'll leave that there.
No, it's okay. We'll just in case you have any more friends or a friend, one friend. Yeah. So I mean, I guess one of the big questions that immediately comes to mind when thinking about something like this is like, why would a big company with 7,000 employees, I think,
More than that.
yeah, more than 7,000, many thousands of employees with offices all over the world, why would they support two guys who want to just make something every day for an entire summer? Why would they let that happen? Why would they fund it? And yeah, I think a lot of it just depends on the kind of company. The reasons vary. Depends on the, well, in this case, there are a lot of people from advertising, and it really makes sense in advertising. But if there is anybody here who isn't in advertising, there are other reasons for a company to do it. I mean, Google kind of made 20% time famous, giving people time off in the office to work on specific side projects. And even though they killed that recently, there's still lots of other companies that have sort of continue to do something like that.
I think we're seeing this big shift too. For now, more and more big companies are supporting people with their side projects, and I think it's pretty interesting. I think we're seeing a shift now where people who work at big companies are no longer just seen as pawns or infantry men who sort of have to, like, when they walk in the office, just talk like people in the office do and act like people in the office do. I think now people are being seen at, we're pretty junior, we're 26, and they let us do this, and which is amazing. But I think now people our age are being seen more as leaders in a way, like people who can actually change the direction of the company and like speak up and come up with new ideas or disagree with the company line. So it's kind of different from the like 1950s like industrial corporate America view of corporate America that still kind of exists in some like corners of the world.
I think it's in almost every business. Innovation and creativity have sort of come to be seen as way more important than they used to be. So now everything being top down doesn't always make sense. The more you can have people at the bottom contributing whatever it is they have to offer, whatever it is they're passionate about, the more that you can take advantage of that, the better. And I think that that's something that you probably all see happening in your respective companies. So with that in mind, we sort of have a theory of about 4 reasons that a company might do this. And I think that's really important if you're trying to sell your side project, because you have to think about what might be motivating your boss or your boss's boss to let you do something like this. So we think one of the big ones is to retain and recruit talent. I mean, that's definitely true with a company like Google, but I think almost any company that allows employees to follow their passion, that's going to be a good reason to work there. It's something that could draw really talented people in.
That's sort of the most like obvious one.
That's pretty obvious.
Just,
yeah, and then another one that's maybe kind of obvious too is also like education or continuing education or gathering skills, where you could take on a side project arguing that you're going to learn something that you can then bring back to the company, or even if you're doing it within the company, during your sort of work time, if you're learning a new skill or practicing something or whatever it is, you can argue that that's education and that's something that's going to then give them a return in the end. And then of course they're also, this is a little bit more philosophical, but another reason that is very relevant, we think, is what we sort of describe as like smallifying their bigness. So if you work in a really small company, chances are they're not going to fund a side project because you only have so many people and so much time. So if they are sort of funding a side project, it's going to be usually like dedicated time to work on something as a group, 1 day a month or something like that. But in a bigger company, it can really make sense to use some of those resources to actually, like some of the resources that they have in terms of manpower, in terms of money, to actually devote to these small things that don't cost very much, that could lead to new innovations or sort of new breakthroughs or whatever. I don't know if I'd call what we've done a breakthrough, but we do now have a new office in Nashville that actually came out of this project that is doing client work. So it can lead somewhere like that. And then of course the other one is sort of strung through all those other ideas, which is kind of just this idea of tinkering or experimentation, where a project could be funded because it could lead to new products very directly, like allowing someone to develop an app that they really want to do, or a new service of some kind, or even a tangible product, like whatever it is. That allowing people time to experiment with things can be something that actually has very real value, like very tangible value for the company.
And in our case with Y&R, I think one of the reasons that they supported us and funded us was because they trusted the fact that we were interested in something and passionate about something. And I think that speaks volumes. And I think, when people are just really passionate about something, odds are that other people in the world are passionate about the same thing. And you find a lot of people now who are willing to put some amount of trust in you, because even though that you don't know exactly where that's going to lead, but that could lead to something really, really interesting. I think, when you're thinking about all the reasons why a company would support a side project, you need to really think about the company you work for and why your company would support a side project.
Can you guys walk me through what your pitch was to your boss,
sure.
and kind of the scenario?
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
Do you want to go straight into that? Or?
Yeah, well, I can go straight into that. So what you have to do is think about your idea and what you want to do, and marry that with the kind of company you work for and their interests and their possible motivations for supporting you. And so for this project, our project, the idea was to actually make a lot of the ideas that Dave and I, we had worked as a creative team before, and to do all of these things that we had always talked about and written down in our little notebooks, to actually like bring those to life. And then also to learn all this new technology that's fueling more conceptual advertising today. So things that aren't TV ads or print ads, but outdoor installations that are powered by Arduinos and Raspberry Pis and all these sorts of multimedia projects. Dave has more of a background in that kind of stuff. I don't really. So I went to school. I did English literature in school and worked as a writer for a little bit. So I really wanted to learn that stuff. So that was really like one of my main motivations. And I had to marry that motivation and that passion with what Y&R would want out of it, or what Y&R would find interesting, which was mostly the tinkering element. So like playing around with this technology and also learning about this technology. Just having people within the agency who knew how Arduinos worked, or knew how, and could come up with ideas that involved them, because it's very hard to brainstorm creative ideas with technologies or about technologies if you don't really understand how those technologies work. And the ironic thing is that these technologies are really, really easy to understand now, more than ever.
Yeah, definitely.
And it just takes 3 months to learn it.
Yeah, I think a big part of that was also just the educational element too. I mean, he sort of said the tinkering thing was important for him, but it's also, you sort of touched on it, but just the fact that we were both learning about so many different things and being able to think about so many different things that we would never really be able to think about in sort of a traditional environment. So we were able to experiment with a lot of things and really focus on stuff that we didn't know anything about going into it. Like I'm completely musically inept, and we spent a week on music, and I learned so much.
Yeah.
So much about music that way. Yeah.
And forcing yourself to do a project every day forces you to let go of your reticence and just dive into this technology and dive into things programs that you don't know how to use and learn them on the spot.
And cover a ton of ground. I mean, to do 90 different projects, like even though some of them were terrible, just the fact that we were like forcing ourselves to work on something every day that was different from the thing we worked on the day before was like, mentally was a really interesting exercise. And I think that actually in the end, we both walked away being able to generate a lot more ideas a lot faster, which was, I think, really valuable professionally. Come on in.
So the question then is like how, so the question then becomes, how do you get a big, esteemed multinational ad agency who's very focused on clients every single day to support a project that's totally unbillable and that will last, 3 months? And there's definitely a process to finally answer your question. There's definitely a process to that.
We'll get there. We'll get there.
Can you talk to us a little bit about the projects? Can you talk to us about one that was really terrible and one that was really good?
Okay. Terrible.
You want to take terrible? I'll take good.
Terrible. I think there were. So we started out our first week. The theme was travel. So we took a trip. For the first week, we were actually on the road, and I don't know. It's I guess it depends on how you think about it. But we wrote a country song about Matt's dog that his parents had given away to a family in New Jersey that we were going to go visit, and we recorded it in the car on the road, and we spent probably 3 hours, 4 hours, like actually on the song and figuring out the music and everything. But that's probably one of the farthest projects from something that would actually be considered good.
Yeah. My dog's name, my mom didn't actually name the dog, but the dog's name is also Prince Albert.
Yeah.
Which made the whole thing kind of
comic
weird.
gold. Yeah, you really go so many directions with that. So that would be probably terrible. I don't remember all the lyrics. We could try.
I think the chorus went, talking about my Prince Albert.
You gotta infect it more.
My Prince Albert. Talking about my Prince Albert.
I'm talking about the dog,
not the piercing.
piercing.
I'm a hard.
Yeah,
And that was the chorus.
Yeah, that was the chorus. Yeah, the
And
dog,
we said
the dog
we performed it in the car on the road. Kayla
playing keyboard
playing
in the back,
keyboard, a friend there
in the
playing
back seat,
keyboard in the back seat
on the highway while going 75 miles an hour.
Right.
Yeah. Yeah. So.
So that was one of the worst projects
Yeah.
we did.
Yeah.
Sounds amazing.
Yeah.
Well, thank you, thank you. Yeah, and then I guess one of the better projects. I don't know. We had a few that were really interesting. One was we set up
Just a few.
yeah, we had like 3 that were good out of 90. We set up like a big screen TV in our sort of studio office. Like we worked in a co-working space that I started 2 years ago. So we had like sort of a lot of freelancers in the office and people who work at a magazine also in this kind of warehouse space with us. And so we set up a big screen TV and a video camera. We sort of had this idea of like, if you were to actually try to create like a time machine with sort of current technology, there are lots of things that could be sort of considered a time machine, right? Like windows into the past, maybe. So we set up a video camera and a big screen TV in the middle of the room, right by the entrance, and people would come in and go out throughout the day, and we recorded, multiple tapes of video, and then the next day, we replayed the videos at the exact same time, and the TV was set up in such a way that if you stood on one side of the TV and looked at the room, it was sort of like looking through a window. It actually lined up with all of the background and everything.
Big.
So you could see like a person sitting at the desk over there, and then if you bent down, you could see the same desk empty, right, or whatever. So we thought it was like a really sort of interesting conceptual piece to actually let people sort of have like a window into the exact same room at the exact same time one day earlier. So we thought that was one of our good projects.
We did one that involved that was actually an Arduino project, and the idea was it was a door handle that would start to shake and move
I'm a
as you
germaphobe.
approached it.
Yeah.
So
I'm
as
afraid
you,
of door handles.
As
in
you
general.
walked up
Yeah.
to this door handle, it would start shaking, sort of like there was a ghost there.
And the idea was it could be a much bigger sculpture. So that was sort of a proof of concept that we could actually get. I mean, not being technologists at all, the fact that we were able to in like 4 hours get a motion detector hooked up to an Arduino that also controlled a servo that then had like a nail stuck to it to actually like hit the door handle, sort of like that was. I mean, that was a big achievement.
Yeah,
we felt like
freaked a lot of people out in the office.
So we sort of imagined that being part of a sculpture that maybe had like 100 door handles. It could be shaped maybe like a germ or some kind of like giant microbe, that could be for like Lysol or something. Yeah.
And so like our thesis going into this project was that a lot of these ideas could be client ideas. And a lot of the advertising that's doing really well, getting a lot of attention, being shared, winning awards, which is sort of an afterthought, I guess, are these ideas that are more conceptual, and that could easily be considered design or art or just a piece of technology. I mean, we saw the guys from Barbarian Group talk about Cinder. I mean, Cinder, which they developed, is a piece of technology. It's not
software.
It's software
For doing creative projects.
for doing creative projects, and that won all sorts of awards.
But they created the software in-house and then released it as an open source project. But that was a side project within the company, and then now it's like being used by other ad agencies and everything, and it's great advertising for Barbarian Group.
Right, and it was just apart from helping the world of creativity.
So which one converted for you guys to Y&R? Which one like got that Nashville?
So all these projects actually happened after they gave us permission to do it. Is that what you mean? Or
Which one of your ideas like lit a light in their head and say, oh, we could use this for this pitch? Like,
so what's fun? Well, what's funny is they let us do it without knowing any of the ideas beforehand,
Right.
and that sort. And then
you mean the new office? Is that what the new office
no,
in Nashville?
like you didn't have any idea of what ideas you were going to come
Oh,
up
yeah,
with.
no.
But you came up with something that they like Barbarian. They were like, oh my God, we could use this. in
Yeah.
a business sense.
Sure, yeah.
Which
I mean,
one?
well, so far, I mean, none of the ideas have really from.
Well, we
90s
haven't
to 80s. Yeah, no, none of them have actually been applied. Really, no,
Yeah.
But what did come out of it though was sort of proof that we could come up with sort of interesting things, especially if we could do something tangible in one day, one work day.
In a way, I think it's a little silly just to take all of these like concepts that have nothing to do with the brand or nothing to do with the world of ideas that brand is living in, and then just sort of like apply it to the brand.
Yep.
So like we have these sort of ideas, we know how to use this technology in the background, but I think now that we're finally working on client projects, you sort of have to immerse yourself in the culture of that brand, the world of ideas around that brand, things that the target's interested in. I think it'd be kind of silly just to be like, oh, robotic door handle, you know.
It's not going to stop us from trying.
Right.
It's not like
You
doing these
might be promoting a
projects.
different way of thinking.
Sorry?
You might be promoting a different way of working.
Oh,
you
absolutely.
Know, just like without restraint, right?
Sure.
You don't have like, oh, let's go back to the brief.
Absolutely.
You don't worry about that.
No, absolutely. And I think that actually is like one of the things that I'm really big on in general is just that, you know, you don't always know. I mean, as a creative as a creative in general, not just within advertising, but as a creative person, it's, I think, always important to, if you have something that you want to do, you may not really know how you're going to apply it, but you shouldn't let that scare you away from pursuing it, because I think a lot of times there is some really great idea to come out of something that you're not sure what its value is on the front end, but I think it's important to pursue those ideas sometimes, you know, and maybe 9 times out of 10 it doesn't lead anywhere, but that one time you get something that's really great. And so, yeah, so it's worthwhile, I think, sometimes to just pursue a creative idea, whatever it is, and see where it goes, right?
There'll be tiny threads and everything. In all the projects that the big projects there will be tiny threads that will feed into something kind of somewhere along it. It's a bit like when we come to places like this and you get back the following week and someone says, okay, what's the new big thing? And there's never a big thing.
Right.
But over the next 12 months, there'll be these moments where it will take you back to a conversation or a talk that you saw, or just the tiniest little thing.
Absolutely.
Which in general, you know, in a broader sense, makes the impact.
Did everybody hear that? No, so he was just saying that basically, you know, you don't necessarily know, where some conversation is going to lead or some experiment is going to lead. That something like South by Southwest, you can, you know, sort of have, you know, go to different talks like this, maybe talks that are better than this, and you can, you know, sort of have conversations with people, and then, you know, 6 months down the road, 9 months down the road, something comes back and turns out to be a useful idea or useful thought. Is that about
Yeah,
right?
yeah, pretty much.
How much do you think the Y&R anniversary played part of your success in pitching this, and could you pull this off again this year, or are they open to
I
other
think if it
people
was like
in the company doing it?
If it was like the 89th anniversary, maybe we would have just done 89 days of making.
Yeah. Okay. So it's
He
not
knows
the reason. It's not the reason why Y&R supported us, but it was Y&R's 90th anniversary last year, and so we did 90 days of making to bring to life this idea that, you know, we've been, you know, as an ad agency, constantly reinventing ourselves and trying new things, and we're trying to, you know, reinvent ourselves every year and do something new. So that's why it was like 90 days instead of 80 days or like 60 days. But yeah, that played a little bit, you know, depending on who you're talking to, that plays more of a role. It is more of a factor when someone has like 5 minutes in the day to listen to your pitch and goes, okay, 90 days, 90th anniversary, go for it. I think, you know, sometimes maybe people like higher up, that matters a little bit more. But for the people that you have to convince to have a meeting with that person, that doesn't really matter quite as much.
Yeah, and I think also Matt came up with 90 days before realizing that connection. It was just sort of a coincidence. I think it's because he plays soccer. So the number 90 just sort of comes up a lot in his life.
90 is kind of a magic number.
Yeah.
So
his sister's a filmmaker. 90 minutes is a good length for a movie.
With the company,
what's that?
as opposed to just being that in tune with the company.
Right.
Yeah, right.
No,
Just
he's
one
super
with-
in tune with the company though too. Yeah.
Did you go through withdrawal when you got done?
Actually, yeah. So, it like on the one hand, it's paid time off, right? We're taking time off to work on our own projects, and you know, if you wanted to work 6 hours a day or 7, you could. You know, we usually ended up working like more doing this, but it was super exhausting. But it was super productive. Like we came up with so many ideas, and then to have like, you know, 2 weeks after that where we're just like decompressing and not brainstorming and not coming up with ideas was actually very strange.
Yeah.
It's
Definitely.
like, yeah,
Is
definitely
it
like a
scalable?
withdrawal.
I mean, is like your idea scalable? Could you like come up with a consulting firm between the two of you?
Well, so
and,
when we were doing it, we were thinking like
Sort of
it'd be
what we're
fun to do these sorts of things with, like, I don't know, take like the city of Detroit, and you could do like, you know, 20 days or 10 days, and just to try to solve 10 specific problems that the city of Detroit might have, or
And
you
they
know,
could also be
with
open
Nashville.
to many, many, many people to participate in, not just 2 people, right? So you're going to get a lot more good ideas
Sure.
if you have tons and tons of people working on something like that.
Right.
But then also, I think in addition to that, I mean, that's sort of the office that we have now in Nashville. is built around this idea of experimentation and sort of generating lots of new sort of, I hate to say outside the box ideas, but to use the cliche, outside the box ideas. So yeah.
How much advanced planning is in the first week was travel? So as you're going through 90 days, how far out were you thinking about what our next theme or project
Yeah,
is going to be?
we had about maybe 10, 20 germs of ideas that we had like been working on a little bit before. So like we had a few that were kind of like scattered throughout the 90 days that we wanted to work on.
They were sort of like drawings that we had maybe in a sketchbook somewhere, or some idea that we jotted down at one point or another. And so I think that we spent probably a week beforehand really trying to narrow it down to themes with some of those ideas in mind. I mean, not many of them, but probably like 10.
Yeah, so
probably 10 ideas.
Every week we had a new theme. Yeah. So the first week was travel. Week 3 was food, and so and it was a good way for us to focus on current events, to focus on the literature, around that topic, and like just delve into it.
So the throes of finishing travel week, are you like, oh my gosh, we got something else coming up? When do we spend time on actually figuring out how we're gonna?
And that's why so much of it became day off. So he was just saying that it could be difficult to be sort of tired and just finishing up one week and realizing that the next day we're gonna have to do a totally new theme and totally new projects. And yeah, I mean that was one of the more exhausting parts of the whole project, was just the nonstop nature of it. Like the fact that we were waking up on Saturday morning or sometimes Saturday afternoon and realizing like, shit, we have to like do something else today, and then the next day just another project, and then the next day
and we had to deal with like creative block too, like writer's block, like what when what happens when you're feeling a little sick or just like out of steam and you don't have any ideas.
One of our themes was freestyle.
Yeah. And we just can't, but like actually we found ourselves actually like reading was the most helpful thing, like just picking up the newspaper or like reading whatever with New York Magazine or just like
finding
Wired
inspiration
or something.
everywhere.
And that was sort of like a lesson for us personally, was just like the more you consume and the more ideas you surround yourself with and think about, the more you'll come up with. And that's something that's kind of obvious to us now, or when you say that might sound obvious, but a lot of times that doesn't happen. A lot of times, when I was working before I was actually a planner at Y&R beforehand. Sometimes I'd just be doing so much work that I wouldn't have time to read books, or I wouldn't have time to read Fast Company or Wired or New York Times or whatever it was. And that's like where ideas come from. So,
wow.
Do you guys have a budget?
Sort of. So Y&R just sort of funded us as like freelancers, or I was a strategist, and so they sort of like paid me, and then just to do my work, even though I wasn't billing a client, which is sort of like an amazing thing. And then I sort of like funneled some of that money to Dave through lunches and like other materials and everything like that.
Yeah. So I wasn't employed by Y&R at the time. So I was, I just started a magazine a year earlier, and so I was still kind of involved in that and a few other sort of things on the side. So then, Matt called me from New York and wanted to do the project and said, "Sounds great, let's do it." And that's how I sort of got paid to do it.
So that sort of gets back to something you were saying, like what was the process? Like how did you actually sell your side project within Y&R? And that really came from, started with, me spending a couple weeks, really like thinking about those things, those ideas that we had come up with before, some of those ideas we had come up with beforehand, thinking about the fact that I wanted to learn a lot of this new technology and wanted to give myself time to do it, and you could just take time off without pay. You could, there are a number of ways I could do that, we could have done that. And so what ended up happening was, just talked to Dave a few times, called him up, maybe had a few conversations, and realized that Dave also was interested in doing this. Dave also wanted to get better at, writing code and doing a lot of that kind of stuff. And so we like sort of cobbled this sort of idea together of doing like a whole summer of creativity where every day you come up with a new idea. Then, so you have this idea that sounds really outlandish, and you're thinking to yourself, there's no way Y&R would support that. Why would they even, they can't actually build that, like we're crazy. And so the next step was to start just talking to people around you and your bosses and your bosses' friends and just people that you know to make sure you're not crazy, right? To make sure that this idea has
or to convince them you're not crazy.
Yeah, to convince them that you're not crazy. And so that was definitely the first step. So, talking to my boss or, a couple bosses like directly above me and just explaining the motivation for it and why I would want to do that. I think that's really important, like to get people's trust, to garner people's trust in you and your motivations for it. That really helps sell the idea. After doing that, and with the help of those people directly above me, I then pitch the idea in a more formal way to their bosses. And so that person sort of becomes your like hype man, right? Like that person who tends to work on a global level if you work in a big company like Y&R. In this case, it was the global strategic director who talks to the CEO, talks to the global creative director daily. That was the person I had to talk to and convince that this was a good idea in a more formal way. So actually giving her name is Sandy Thompson, she's amazing, giving her a one-page document that just says this is what I want to do, this is how much it would cost, this is the deal, it's not going to be billable, but this is why I think it's valuable. And that's the key part. And that's when understanding the company you work for is huge and so important. So we realized that Y&R as a company right now is a really big agency, like other big agencies, is trying to act smaller, right? They want the people working within Y&R to learn this new technology, to apply it, to speak up, and actually force change somehow, or force new ways of thinking. And so that was sort of the angle that we pitched it with. So after getting sort of this hype man on board, we then talked to the people you ultimately need to convince. So the CEO and chief creative officer who can green light it.
So if you were on paid time off and you didn't work for Y&R on yourself, was there any discussion before your project started about equity or ownership? So if you guys invented something that turned into a product and make dollars,
None of it was on paper. We've known each other since high school, so we're sort of we trust each other. But as far as the relationship to Y&R, I mean the understanding, verbally at least, was that Y&R would let us own any of the things that we came up with.
There was a lot of goodwill.
IP-wise.
There was a lot of goodwill there too,
Yeah.
because we sort of trusted that Y&R wouldn't take an idea we had. Maybe if it was an idea for a software, I don't know, something like Cinder, and just do it themselves and fire us, which might have been naive and short-sighted, but there was a lot of goodwill between both parties, and I think that goodwill sort of that's why they let us do it too. They had a lot of goodwill in us to just be we trust that you will come up with something, come up with something good, come up with some good ideas because you're actually so passionate about doing it.
Yeah. And also, I mean, a good way to think about it too is that this was basically a creative boot camp. I mean, it was sort of, regardless of the IP generated or the outcomes of each individual day. I mean, I think, at least for me, and I think for Matt too, so much of the importance of this project was just to spend that many hours consecutively just thinking of random things, right? So, like I said, some of the ideas were really terrible, and then some of them were, okay. But what was important was just being able to spend that much time trying to generate new ideas, because that became just great training for thinking that way, and faster.
It's weird. Oh, sorry.
Sorry, no.
That's I was just going to ask. So you had 90 days. You obviously had things like working out a concept, you had things like sourcing materials. Did you come up with any strategies for kind of refining that process so you didn't get to the end of the day and end up without a physical thing or an idea, something?
Sure. Yeah. You mean in any given day?
Yeah.
Okay. So the question is if we came up with any sort of strategies for sort of narrowing it down as we sort of brainstormed throughout the day, so that we didn't reach the end of the day having not really gotten anywhere. And I think so. Informally, yes. I mean, I think that we spent we just sort of got in a groove where. Sometimes it was, the beginning of the work day. Sometimes it was later in the day, and then we would work late into the night. But whenever it was that we got started, we would sort of have a vague sense of where we wanted to go with it.
And it would usually start with news,
Yeah.
reading the
Sometimes,
news and talking about what's happening in the world,
Yeah.
right? And
or things that we wanted to try. I mean,
Yeah.
there's another one, like, yeah.
Yeah.
Just like a new thing, maybe some, like, I mean, not that Arduino is new, but I mean, just for anybody who doesn't know, Arduinos are microcontrollers. They're basically like, sort of like little computers that can control motors and take inputs from sensors and things like that. So I really wanted to get into that, and I didn't really have any experience. I didn't have much of a background at all, coding or dealing with any of this stuff, but it's all pretty user-friendly. So that was just something that we really wanted to do, at least one project that involved an Arduino, just to be able to play with that. So the beginnings of each project came from a different place, but in the end, yeah, they were all sort of, had a pretty good idea by like lunchtime. Yeah, exactly. Yeah, exactly. And there were also plenty of times where we went way over here and then somehow found a way to steer it back to something that made sense, sort of. Wow, a lot of hands up. Yes.
So you had no IP agreement. What concessions did you give back to the company? Did you agree not to quit immediately after?
Yeah, you know, sort of a tacit agreement. I mean, I think like the reason we were doing this, you know, it was because we also, you know, like care about Y&R and like Y&R as an institution in a way too. Like, so we weren't going to just like do this and then bounce and then leave and like go to another place.
Actually bounced in.
You actually like came into Y&R. Yeah, and so there's just like a ton of goodwill. I think like when it gets super formalized, it can get very bureaucratic. And like one of the nice things about the way we sold in our side project was that it wasn't bureaucratic at all. And it was more about building trust and goodwill with those people who could approve it, and then trusting us to like go down this rabbit hole. And they didn't know exactly what where they didn't know exactly what the payout would be. And on the one hand, that seems crazy, right? It's like why would a company invest this money if they don't know what they're going to get? But I think the reality is that usually it's not that much money, and the results has a high ceiling. Right? So like if you start a new office that's actually doing work and doing like 5 or 6 good ideas a year, like that is like a result, that is value, right? So
or even if one of those ideas goes anywhere ever, then it will have been worthwhile.
Right, that's sort of the thing with advertising is like 5% of advertising or less than that is actually like really good.
Like successful.
Yeah. Right? Like there's so much, and we all know that, right? We sometimes like brush that under the rug. But like, you know, advertising that like jumps off the page and grabs you, or concepts that get written about in Wired or whatever it may be, the New York Times, and are actually really interesting. And there are a number of reasons for that. But to get those ideas, you have to sort of like swing for the fences, and like there's not always like a very simple, concrete way to get there. So you sort of swing for the fences. That's the subtitle to the new. Yeah.
I don't know much about baseball, so.
Yeah.
Did you guys bring back any like methods or opportunities for the company to scale an idea like this? Like, all right, everybody, we had a sabbatical time, sign up for your 90 days, or small scale, or what did it change, or did it?
That's actually a great idea. We didn't do that. What we did do though was we came back with the idea to set up Y&R Moonshop, which is this little tiny creative office, really like an outpost in Nashville. That's actually based in the same co-working space, and that is brainstorming creative ideas using the same sort of
songs about dogs.
Yeah, exactly.
No.
No, exactly. Probably. Mars Pet Foods is in Nashville, so yeah.
Yeah.
They own like all the dog food brands.
Yeah.
So yeah. So maybe.
So
maybe.
like more like non-traditional
Like a
stuff
censored version.
that
yeah.
you know, probably not songs about dogs.
Yeah, but there are lots of other creative, like really random creative ideas that we came up with that could turn into, or similar concepts that could turn into a new product for a client.
To give you guys like more examples of ideas that we came up with, like that could be helpful. Like we came up with an idea for a piece of art, a canvas with a drop cam, which is a live streaming camera installed within the canvas that would actually watch you as you were watching it. And at the time, we were just thinking of it as a canvas, as its own sort of concept. But that could be an out-of-home installation, right? That could be something that, you know, for Kodak or for any sort of...
about anonymity or like an anti-NSA campaign or something. I probably shouldn't say that.
Yeah.
But so they're all on Snowden right now. But it was, and that was an interesting piece just in that it was kind of about voyeurism and what it means to, like, you know, stare at something and judge it, because in turn people, we set up a website where you could anonymously look at what the painting was seeing at any given time, so that people who in the office who were looking at this piece could then be watched anonymously by people, and how that changed the act of looking at the thing. Another one was we came up with a razor that would sort of give you like hipster scruff. So it's
but
like
a disposable razor.
A disposable
cheap
razor.
disposable razor.
Yeah, so it's a disposable razor, but that it had a guard on it, like when you shave your head, so that it didn't cut all the way down to the skin. It just like left a little bit.
And at the time, that was
I looked like I could be using it, but it was horribly painful. I used it once. But that could be refined into something that could actually be a promotional thing for Gillette.
And that was inspired by an article about big razor companies, like kind of not totally failing yet, but like, you know, their profits and revenues decreasing.
Facial hair is killing them.
And right,
the popularity of facial hair is killing razor
right.
companies.
So it's a kind of a joke. It's a funny thing, but it's actually true. Like, a lot of younger people aren't buying disposable razors, or even like Mach 4s, like, you know, nicer ones, a little bit more expensive ones, because they're like letting their like beards.
But they're not letting it go completely crazy. They're like keeping it trimmed and everything. So
right.
So the solution to that is, okay, make a razor that allows you to maintain that kind of facial hair.
Right.
Which is, I mean, simple enough concept, but it worked.
So to like go back to your question, so we set up this office, and part of what this little mini office is doing is teaching people within Y&R globally about technology and about some of these things. So we just launched the office, but we're going to start doing like, you know, 2-minute like tech videos about Arduinos, and like what they are, and actually like how easy they are to program for and use in your creative, you know, brainstorming. And the reason that works is because Y&R is a big agency, right? So like Y&R does have like 180 offices around the world. So like a 2-minute video from 2 guys in Nashville can actually like potentially help a lot of people learn about this technology, or just get interested in it.
I have a question. So how do you think the impact of what your project brought to the company? What do you think, if there was an impact within the mentality, or how did your coworkers take the project, and what did they think about that?
Coworkers.
There was a lot of buzz and a lot of excitement, I guess, around the office. We were constantly checking up and like really wanting to support that, because it really does show that there is a breed of energy around ideas, and it doesn't matter where they come from or who. And that's what I loved about it. When you get to like these really big agencies, you think the higher up, that's the more important idea. Or then you went all the way down to these 2 in a little teeny remote area, and there was rally behind it, and it was like, great, what can you give us? So there was constant, like, we would get inspiration from them to say, oh, that's actually something interesting we can go back on. A lot of rally, and it allowed us to open up different ways of like thinking and approaching our bosses as well. So that's what I would say.
I don't want to use the word trailblazer, but I'm going to. I mean, I think in a way, in a very strange, small way, we, I think, set an example and just showed people that, hey, Y&R will support projects like this, which again gets back to the recruiting and retaining talent question. Just to prove that Y&R would support something as crazy as what we did. So if you are, a developer who works for Y&R, and you really want to do if you want to make the next Cinder, like Barbarian Group made, you could pitch that to them, and they would almost definitely support it, because that's like way more obviously useful to them than 2 guys experimenting for 90 days.
Right, and I think another important point here too is that, and this gets back to what I was saying earlier about like the new kind of corporate America that exists today. I think bigger companies are looking to diversify the ways in which they change and reinvent themselves. So the traditional method of reinventing yourself or modernizing yourself as a big company is to just start hiring new people who you see as like contemporary, current, modern.
And like top-down branding decisions.
And top-down branding is like things but they take longer, right? That process of change takes a really long time.
A lot less organic, too.
And it's a lot less organic. and I think there's this new way, and it's not just Y&R, obviously. I think, you know, it's true of many, many different companies. Like Google is sort of doing this constantly as well. But it's kind of like allowing, enabling, you know, just a few people within the company to kind of like, you know, get their ideas to kind of sprout out. Or like another metaphor is to like just infect the company with, you know.
Sorry. Can I also add that like it is allowed for us as an agency to kind of say, he has this interest that he's now this expert, and it creates a network of ideas and people that are strong in these different areas without like saying we're so siloed and you only do this. It is now a network of, oh, he's done this would be interesting, and there's a lot of cross ideas and pollination in terms of teamwork I've seen.
Yeah, it's also how Matt Nathan Johnson strategist.
A think tank of ideas, random ideas that would just inspire creativity throughout and communication.
And then he's an expert on this, so he did something like this, let's bring him in over here to just talk to our team about this. Yeah.
Are you guys leaders in that? Are you appointed like the liaisons of this method in your agency now?
Yeah, I mean, it's not like that formalized. We're sort of we're heading up this little mini office, this little creative outpost in Nashville, which is like where we did the project. And so yeah, to that extent.
I think with like Y&R Puerto Rico.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, there are other offices that are inviting us to, you know, sort of unofficially come and talk about
and
what
also
we did and what could be done.
And to work on real projects.
Yeah.
And so, like, you know, when you have companies that are like global networks, you can, there's no reason why someone in New York or Nashville can't work for someone in Tokyo, especially when you're dealing with like more conceptual ideas. It's not like you have to translate a whole print ad, right?
It seems like you guys were completely disconnected from the regular agency structure. Do you think that helped you? And the other way to kind of ask that is, had you ever tried to get side projects up before and they failed?
So I had never tried to pitch another side project and have it fail, although that would probably be a really like helpful. I feel like this could have failed and I would have learned a lot from it. And like almost did at certain times, and I did learn from that. Like for example, like who's actually going to pay you specifically? Like, you know, is it going to be this office, or is it going to come out of this like slush fund, or is it going to come out of like, where's that? So like there are certain very logistical things that you have to figure out, and that I learned immediately when like.
Was that like global? Was it an office based?
It was out of New York office.
Yeah, but
So,
sorry.
Yeah.
So I
My
was,
reference to it is that I've tried to get side projects up, and there's this West Wing phrase that the urgent overcrowds the important.
Yeah.
And then basically the agency structure just like all went on. You had producers on it, you had creative directors, you had all this other stuff. But eventually everyone just lost interest because no one owned it.
Yeah.
And I lost control. So that's why I was wondering if you had similar. That's why you were so disconnected from the agency
I think being 1,000 miles away from the New York office, I mean, did really help us because we were working more like artists in a studio without really anybody sort of, you know, giving us deadlines or times to be at a certain place, or, you know, where are you on this project? You know, it's 5 p.m. Like, where is it? Like, where's the project? You know, so I mean, not that that would have happened, but it certainly removed all risk of that sort of oversight.
And the helpful thing is that you just with Skype, you can like talk to people immediately. Like so we were like 1,000 miles away, but in another sense, we were like, you know, a phone call away from everyone.
We're also posting our results every day, or almost every day. I mean, there were definitely cases where we missed that.
I kind of found that I was at the BBC for a long time, when I first tried to run 20% time schemes, I kind of found they didn't work for lots of reasons. I understand why Google have kind of pulled them. But the interesting thing that I did find about them was that do them on a case-by-case basis rather than try to regiment, you know, 1 day a week or whatever. But also it just kind of became a way of thinking. It became a philosophy rather than sort of a rule. And just having that philosophy within the team is great because it empowered members of the team to have the confidence to come to me and say, look, I've just got this idea. It's a bit of a harebrained idea, but let me run with it. And but what I did find was, and the really, really positive thing, people early on would think, 20%, it's kind of like 20% off work, isn't it? I could do that. But it's not. I used to call it 120% time, because basically anyone who's kind of got the guts to go to the boss and say, I've got this idea, are the kind of people, probably like you did for 90 days, where you wouldn't stop working at 6 o'clock, you'd be working till midnight, probably most nights, and you'd work for your weekend.
And every weekend.
You were so passionate about this thing, which was ultimately adding value to your company. You just would do anything it takes to. So it's a really kind of fantastic thing. It's a brave thing for companies to do, but done the right way, it's kind of a really fantastic thing.
Absolutely.
I think that also gets back to the idea of like, you know, there are two ways of running a bigger company, right? There's one way where, you know, 5 people or sometimes one person makes all the decisions and then everyone else just follows. And there's another way where that one person or 5 people give a little bit of control away and let other people within the agency come up with ideas and then give them a little bit of money and say like, well, let's see if that idea floats. And then if that idea floats, it can actually sprout up and do, I'm mixing metaphors here, but it can actually sprout up and
Like an aircraft.
like create some, so like our little office. So we had this idea for 90 Days of Making, which it required a little investment, right, on the part of the company to help us do it. They let us do that, and that led to this little mini office that requires a little bit more investment. If that's successful, we could open one up in Europe. We could open one up in Asia. If that model is successful and like working in a co-working space is successful and we can actually like come up with good ideas and make that happen, you can sort of, YNR as a company can like ratchet up their investment because you're proving it along the way.
Very, very low risk. I mean, it's little or no change in overhead, right? I mean, so Matt was getting paid to be a strategist, and then he was getting paid to do the side project, and now he's getting paid to do the office in Nashville. But there's no change in the cost for YNR. It's just, you know, now they have to find somebody
Pay for
to take his
materials.
place. Yeah, pay for materials, little things like that. But it's very, very small change in overhead.
Good.
So you mentioned blogging, or what was the process of documenting the process? How much, how did you weigh that down?
Lots of iPhone photos. Yeah, so very like professional studio photography with an iPhone. And then we just use Tumblr, so just a really basic blogging platform. And
tried to update like 6 times a day, 7 times a day, as much as we could.
And so we'd give updates as we were working on something, and you know, sometimes there might not be a final product for a week or a month, but we would still like make a post saying, okay, this project, like for example with the time machine, I don't know if you were here when we mentioned that, but we filmed everything one day and then replayed it the next day. And so that was a sort of 2-day project that we just hit play while we were working on other stuff and then posted photos of what that looked like the next day, even though it was for the previous day. So, but yeah, it was basically just trying to like keep things as up to date as possible.
And we had this another idea, for example, where we like orphaned a little plant on a major like street in Nashville.
Chained it to a light pole.
Chained it to a light post, and it was like this little, it was a lily. Little lily
named Lily,
and the idea was to see how people would treat that flower.
We gave it a little plaque explaining that it was a public plant that belonged to the community, and that, you know, if it wasn't watered, it would probably die. And so then we left a little like whiteboard piece with a marker chained to it, like a whiteboard marker chained to it. And the idea was, it said like, I was last watered on, and a blank, for people to leave a date, and that worked for probably like 2 weeks.
That was one day's project, but we were sort of like tracking it for 2 weeks, and funnily enough for that, we found that people took really, really good care of it for about 5 days, and then kind of stopped.
Well, they kind of sort of let it survive a little bit longer.
Yeah, a little bit. So like people would
Less
water it
diligently.
like constantly for the first 5 days, and then almost too much, and then just kind of stopped. And then eventually someone just stole it, and we're not quite sure if
not the bucket. So the bucket that it had lived in was still there, but the flower.
And we didn't have footage of that. That kind of would have been amazing, because we were really curious if they stole it to destroy it or stole it to like move it, because
they just stole it. It was a nice lily.
Yeah. That's an example of.
And we replaced it with daisy.
Yeah.
The daisy, really nice daisy. Sorry, there's so many people. If we can just go through it, like, go ahead and then you can go and just kind of keep it going.
I just wanted to ask a quick process question about, so you guys did this, just the 2 of you, and it was a very like microcosm of like, you know, very entrepreneurial, kind of like, we have this idea, we'll do it, we don't have to vet it through anybody kind of thing. What are your thoughts around, I've had thoughts about like crowdsourcing this kind of concept, very much in the same way we have a large network in our agency. It's like, how do I build a relationship between me and a copywriter in Amsterdam? Well, maybe we do a side project together. And like, I mean, do you think that sort of like not knowing each other, and do you think that could stick?
I think it's very possible. I think like this gentleman over here was suggesting, it's important to have some kind of structure around it. And then also, as the guy over there from RGA was saying, it's also important to have like some sense of ownership over it. So if it's just a totally open-ended, like crowdsourced competition type thing, I think you might have more trouble. But if it's something that's like this person and I, or this group of people are going to be working on something with this group of people, and here's what the project is, and here's the timeline or whatever.
So you get a
So we
full
actually,
year.
so it's funny, we didn't do this as a day's project, but we had an idea for a collaboration platform where you could, so for mostly big companies, but it could be for anyone really, where you would be collaborating with someone on the other, so a developer who's up all night and kind of a night owl, like most of them are, could collaborate with a writer or an art director or someone
Like in
else
Japan.
on the other side of the world who's up that time normally. And the
Like
joke
at
was
an
that like,
office.
and I think there's a truth there that like so many people, so many coders just stay up so late, and they are night owls. And there's this like, there could be this like little economy of like collaboration happening that isn't happening because there's no tool for that. Like you could just use Skype, but there
seems
could
like
be a
it'd
more
be easy.
Yeah,
like,
oh,
from
absolutely.
technology standpoint.
Absolutely. I think the trick is just making sure that some group of people have some vested interest in it, right? So like we were obviously very invested in it, but if it's more open and more crowdsource oriented, then it's just I think an issue of just getting people to care about it,
Okay.
right? Like this is just my opinion, but
Yeah.
You guys obviously have really good rapport as well. So you must have entered into this project going, this is a fair amount of this is going to be fun. I think the hardest thing with working with people that you haven't got that rapport with, or you don't know, and especially in a different time zone, is that there's not that kind of thing that you're looking forward to necessarily if
Sure.
you're taking a bit of a chance.
by
We
the
actually
end, we were
hate each
definitely
other.
yeah, we were hating each other by the end of the project. Dear God. Yeah, I mean, just working with someone every single day without a single day apart for that long, even through like we had basically our first week was a vacation that was the project, and so it's sort of like just having no break was tough. But at the same time, yeah, I mean, I also think that not having that level of formality, just the counterpoint to that is that if you were working with somebody that you didn't really know, like across, somewhere on the other side of the world, then I think you might feel more of like an obligation. But because we are such good friends, there were lots of days when it was just kind of like, I just don't really feel like doing it. It's like, no, we really need to do it. And it's like, yeah, like later, I got this thing, and I just can't work on this right now. Like, tonight, we'll work on tonight. So yeah, I mean that kind of thing happens too. The danger of being too informal at times. Yeah. Sorry.
Does Weiner consider this a one-shot, or do you consider the replicate it is like a training program?
There has been like a little bit of talk about similar projects happening, but nothing formal at this point.
Yeah, I mean, I think that it's more of a one shot in that I think they're like looking for people who have different interests to follow something that they're actually interested in. So like someone could come along that does something like that's kind of similar but like different in some very specific way. For example, like someone could do that in New York, in the office, and maybe that works better. And then they'll start investing in that, and then maybe that works better than our thing, and then they'll just start pursuing that. But they're not gonna just like, I don't think they're gonna send people to like remote areas of Nashville's not a remote area.
Nashville's super
Is
remote.
Moonshot open for that though? Like where people can come and take their week sabbatical
Yeah.
and create? Or
Absolutely.
How big is the space? How many people can be there?
Well, so right now the space is about 2,300 square feet, 2,500 square feet. It's actually a little bit smaller than the other office that we were in. We're in the same building, we've just moved into a different space.
But there's
because
a
of the
magazine
other
in there,
business, yeah.
designers, developers, like front end developers. So like every time we have an idea, and it's amazing how giving these people are. They like, we'll talk to our friends for like an hour or two about an idea. They'll even help us code, and they like.
Just to pimp Nashville for a second, it's an amazingly creative city, but at the same time, there aren't a ton of big international projects happening advertising-wise or in a lot of other realms. So there are a lot of very, very talented people who've moved there from somewhere else who have this huge, very useful skill set that they're not really using much for whatever it is they're doing. And they're all kind of willing to help out and collaborate.
Like we had this idea to do like a Bitcoin-powered hot tub. And so the idea was that Bitcoin mining rigs like produce a lot of energy and a lot of heat that usually isn't harnessed, but you could harness that and use it to like heat a building, or like we wanted to heat a hot tub. And we were joking about it with someone, and he was like, oh, I could like
Yeah, then we
build
sort
that
of
like
figured out
this
how to do
weekend.
it.
Let's
Yeah.
like do it. And we're like,
Yeah.
oh, but like, what if it's like a wine art thing? He's like, don't even worry about it.
Yeah.
Like, we'll just do it, and that'll be fun.
And we'll figure out how to pay for it.
So yeah, and that's sort of like that's what why the co-working space works.
Can I just ask, if you could go back to before 90 Days of Making and speak to Dave and Matt before that, is there any like overarching advice or like a message you would give yourself that would have made it better or streamlined it or something that is useful moving forward?
Yeah. Okay. Do you want to do this?
I'll go first, I guess. I think a lot of people, like especially who work for big companies, spend a lot of time complaining. And I spend a lot of time complaining too, because there are like things that aren't amazing all the time, and sometimes it is cooler to work for a smaller company. But there are benefits, like you get big clients and you get like more exposure sometimes. I think the less time you spend complaining, and the more time you just spend like crafting your pitch and like expressing what you actually feel in a semi-smart way, the better it is, because the people above you like usually realize the same things you realize. They just don't have ideas right at that moment to change things.
There's a great quote from James Murphy of LCD Sound System, which is the best way to complain is to make something.
Yeah, that's great. That's great.
So we were just complaining first.
Huh?
Lab coats every day?
Yeah, well, it's funny, we wore these, pretty much every day during the project, just because why not? And then they went into my closet. I kept Matt's when he moved back to New York, and then we busted them out for this, and it was just like back in the saddle again is what I felt like. It's like I could hear theme music as I was like putting it on. It was kind of amazing.
We did it to psych ourselves up. Those first day, this goggles, and then we're like, oh shoot, like what are we gonna do?
Yeah.
Beakers everywhere. And they're like,
yeah.
oh,
So we
God.
did karate in a parking lot for a couple hours to get psyched up for this.
And what did you do on downtime? Together or like as far apart?
Oh no, definitely together. Matt, did you live with me the whole time?
No, not the whole time, but half the time. Yeah, I sort of overstayed my welcome at his apartment.
Okay, so Matt and I, we actually lived together during this project for the first like month and a half of the 3 months. So then
Which his girlfriend loved.
Yeah.
Just like totally loved.
Yeah, she was super stoked about that. We live in a studio too. But no, it was great. It was great because when we got to work, 24/7. We had an idea at at 3 in the morning. No, we were never in bed at 3 in the morning. If we had an idea at like 6 in the morning when we were in bed, I could just be like, hey Matt, hey, I got this idea for the thing, and he would be 10 feet away.
Yeah.
So that
Hey,
was
shut up.
Yeah, no, exactly. And my advice to my early stuff would be the format of the blog originally was very, very confusing and didn't really follow like a linear path, so it was terrible for telling that story. So we reformatted it at the very end of the project and like totally redesigned the blog, which didn't actually require much design. It was like someone else's design, but that helped. I think
That's
a
a
little
whole
bit, make
other
it clear.
point that I'm going to say in like a really, really quickly. There's so much open source technology right now that for two people who are very much generalists and not really we like know very, very basic things about like new tech, like Arduinos, for example. There's so much that generalists can do with this technology that they couldn't do even like 2 years ago. So like, we have a project right now that involves, and it was sort of like Wine Art Moonshop's first project. It's called Social Soundscape, and it involves creating music, turning geotagged tweets in Austin during South by Southwest into this like free-form, indeterminate music. And we just sort of like built a like proof of that ourselves with like simple JavaScript that someone like already built and like a Google map, and like that sort of led to the bigger idea that was like a slightly bigger production. But yeah,
Thank you.
cool.
Thanks very much.
Yes, but I don't really use Twitter. Yeah, no, not really. I know I'm like the only person at South by Interactive that doesn't.
Yeah, mine is Young Colangelo.
But you don't really tweet much.
I don't tweet much.
Yeah, I'm kind of the same way. Like
we like Instagram more. I don't.
Yeah, I don't know. Yeah.
Twitter just seemed, I don't know, whatever.
Yeah.
What are your Instagram?
I don't really use Instagram.
Sort of like.
I have email. I do.
It's actually anti-technology.
Yes, I do. I'll give you my card.
Yeah.